Okay. Right. So thank you very much for attending this meeting, and thank you. I'm sorry we're a small group at the moment. It's good to see you. Have we got any apologies? I believe we have.
Yes, Nick Fellows, Rebecca Margetts, Stephen Wade, Matt Pope and Debbie Milligan. And Sarah Webster is being substituted by Matthew Tate.
Thank you very much. Now we've got the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone get any comments about those minutes? You have to take a. So I'm going to propose that we accept them. Can we have a seconder? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Declaration of interests. Have we got any declarations of interest on this agenda? So okay. I don't believe there's any public here for the public question times and no members here for the members question times. So we've got the Wellbeing Board annual report. And is that you, Ingrid?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to just briefly introduce this item and then hand over to Karen to talk a little bit to it in a slightly more detail. But I just firstly want to introduce it with a great deal of thanks to all our partner organisations and their teams for their contribution to this. So we have moved away. Those of you who have been working with this board for some time will know that in the last few years this has been a narrative report where each organisation has provided an annual update on their activity, and we are moving, and thankfully, towards a more focused report on the strategic aims and objectives of this board as outlined in our Wokingham strategy into action. There will continue to be evolution over the 24-25 period as we develop our Wellbeing Board dashboard, which is in process. So that will continue to evolve, but this marks a huge step change from where we were before. And as you will see, the structure of it is aligned to our subgroups to the Wellbeing Board that report through our steering group. So each of those has completed a reporting template focused on the aims and objectives for this year and introducing those strategic aims for next year with some of the key outcomes from the year and some of the measures that we are using to track improvement and change across time. So I'll hand over to Karen for any particular updates, as Karen's pulled all this together and is the public health lead for the Wellbeing Board. So many thanks to you as well, Karen. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ingrid. And thanks again to everyone involved in this, because this is across partnerships, cross organisations that have all taken part in this. They hold the detail, in all honesty, but I'm happy to take comments and questions and we can take that back. We did also think it'd be worthwhile to bring back this to each of the steering groups when the partnership leads come back and present to the steering group, so we can give it that due consideration and address those questions. So the key thing, as Ingrid says, is that we'll be moving more to kind of measuring impact, moving more to that kind of dashboard, which is in the appendix, and that will start to be presented in a prettier way going forward, so that we can start to monitor success and activity there, and then also think about where we need to come together to drive improvement where it's needed. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair. Can't hear you online.
Sorry. I thought I'd pressed it now. I must have pressed it twice. I don't think I can see any question. Oh, sorry, Susan.
Not a question so much, but a comment. So I heard, Ingrid, if I heard correctly, about the breadth of engagement that has happened for this report. I just wondered if you could say something about what that's meant in terms of the quality of the report and our actions moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So We have been on a real journey in our Wellbeing Board since we agreed our strategy some 2-3 years ago now, and our strategy into action. So we have put in place and strengthened through partnership the groups that sit under the Wellbeing Board delivering on those strategic objectives. And some of those existed before, and some of those are new and have evolved over the last 2 to 3 years. All of them are partnership boards or groups, so there isn't a single one of those that is one organisation. That involves an awful lot of commitment from an awful lot of teams and organisations, and it's a commitment to Wokingham. These are Wokingham specific groups, and it has really allowed us to have conversations that are specific to our residents, to our local priorities, and has allowed us to, I think at this point in some, those groups are at different places, because some, as I say, existed before and have mature partnerships. Others are more are newer, have been forming, and are, for example, social isolation and loneliness, relatively new. That was formed under in the last couple of years, but doing fantastic work looking at our priority groups in Wokingham, particularly around our male residents who are at particular risk, looking at older people, looking at LGBTQIA plus communities, so looking at people who are experiencing social isolation and loneliness. Those conversations across organisations didn't have the right forums before, so there is still work to do, but it is a much the landscape has much improved, and the focus for our own footprint has been much improved. What we are now moving towards, the next step, well, as relationships and groups are now working, have their own objectives, is to try and demonstrate this bit, the difficult bit, as always, the impact of the work that those groups are doing. And that involves obviously identifying the ambition of each of those groups, and then understanding where we are now, but then also tracking that progress as we go through the next few years of our journey. So that's where we are now, I would say, for many of those groups at the moment.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I know, Karen, you did talk about sort of like impact as well, because I'm particularly, I guess, yes, absolutely interested in impact, how we measure impact. I find sometimes as well with partnership meetings, it's about having the right person as well, representing the organisation or whatever, because it's who can make the decisions that need to be made, because we spend, as rightly so, a lot of time in partnership working, and it is ensuring that it's the right conversations. But it sounds like you have an impact in terms of actually understanding how we'll measure impact. That it's sounding like that work is taking place as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I think all those
sorry.
partnership groups have worked together to identify those measurable outcomes that we'll look at. So essentially it's in that kind of list form, and now we want to make it so it's an interactive dashboard, so it's very easy to look into that. And building what Ingrid was saying, it will be about measuring kind of overall success and impact, but as part of that we've got to look at the differences within that, so looking at who we need to reach. So for example, free school meals is one of the ones in there, and looking at kind of who benefits educationally in that. Is it SEND and that breakdown? So that's what we need to start looking at, is that disaggregation of that data, so we have that impact overall, but also where do we need to focus more in our population.
And just to add to it, in terms of having the right people at the table, you're absolutely right, and that's difficult across 8-9 subgroups. You know, there really are a lot of groups under this Wellbeing Board doing a lot of activity, and I wouldn't sit here and say that we have all the right people in all the right rooms at the moment, but we are, you know, in that improvement journey. We are very definitely in a much better place than we were before, and I think what has helped us enormously is having the steering group meetings, because that has had partner representatives in the room and has enabled us to voice where we have needed support or where we have needed to raise issues, and that has been really helpful to have that forum, which has been new in the past year. So that's been a really good step forward too. I think there will be some consolidation and some change coming over the next year, because we are as people recognise the strength of what we are doing, we are growing in our kind of subgroups. And I think that we get to a point where that becomes slightly unwieldy in terms of just growing under the Wellbeing Board. So I think we will, over the 24-25, have a think about how some of those might come together in a slightly different way, but we'll bring that to the Wellbeing Board in due course. But it's all a positive evolution.
Thank you, and thanks very much for all the work on those.
Not all.
Thank you, Susan. I don't think there are any other questions at all. So we move on to the got the vote for it, sorry. To accept it. So I'll propose that. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, now we can move on to the foundation trust update with Andrew.
Great, thank you. I'll kind of cover two parts, both kind of an operational update and then some of the strategic update on the new hospital. So we've obviously had since I was last here, we've had the summer months, some slight easement to winter pressures, but hey, it's still a very busy time across all of our services. I think we've also benefited from much reduced industrial action in this last period as well. So that's really allowed us to run a full elective programme, over 10% more than activity than we were running pre-pandemic on a month-by-month basis. And obviously we're still a long way from where we would like to be in terms of the waiting time for some of the elective services. But actually, as Matthew's report highlights, you can see that compared to others on the elective side, we are able to provide some relatively good waiting times compared to near and national benchmarks on that. I think the most pressing issue, like many hospitals, particularly hitting us at the moment, is around the financial pressure. We know we had a really challenging financial settlement and plan at the start of the year, and it's absolutely proving to be so. Contributed by some of the demand factors we're facing and some cost pressures that we've got around supplies in particular. So there's a really big focus on efficiency opportunities, as you might expect, and delivering to our financial position going on at the moment. And we're in regular conversation with our partners on that front. If I move to the new hospital, many of you will be aware that the new hospital programme itself is being subject to a national review. We are part of that review. The review is considering a whole range of options, from a much narrowed down programme, but also looking for different ways of securing the funding to be able to do the whole programme. The review's been conducted by the new hospital team itself, and we're expecting conclusions in line with October's budget. In the meantime, we're progressing with things that we have already had in train. So we're coming to the end of a period of engagement we had on potential different sites, and we've had 8,500 people respond to that, which is really great. We think that might be more than responded to the formal consultation in our near neighbours, so we're really proud of that and really thankful to the public for engaging with that. Alongside that and from that, we've got some really rich data about what different sites might mean and the benefits and issues associated with some of those. And I'm sure over the coming months I'll be able to come back and share with this group, as well as with others, what that tells us. We've also had some provisional demand and capacity work from the new hospital team. They've built like a national model of hospitals to show quite where the opportunities are and how big hospitals would need to be. That's been really insightful. We've had good participation from our partners on that, and I think as we now go forward, we'll want to be doing some really detailed work understanding what that model says, because it makes some big. The new hospital team centrally are making some big assumptions about the general health of the population. And how that will evolve over the next 10 years, and then what we can do together across a health and care system to support people coming out of hospital and receiving their care in the community. So as I say, both of those pieces will be subject to some joint working, and we had a really good session with Susan and the management team over the last couple of weeks, mapping out where we needed to do some of that work with the wider team, with Ingrid and colleagues over the coming months.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I know we shouldn't say personal things really, but I had 3 days at the RBH, and getting through emergency was quite long-winded. But once I got through, the care I got was superb. And I think, take that back, because, it's appreciated.
Well, thank you, David. I'm glad that you received the care that we aspire to provide to our patients.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, last time I reported on my own experience at RBH, which is also positive. I wondered how, in the light of both the financial challenges and the uncertainty around the new hospital, how staff morale is doing.
I think it's a really challenging time to work in the service, has been for a number of years, and we're not immune to staff being under that kind of pressure. We're working really hard to support them, and we've had some really positive results from our staff survey that I'm sure you've seen over the past months about how people feel inside the organisation. But it is a difficult time. It's encouraging to see the mood music around some of the industrial action responses, because that's been a real challenge to have to kind of deal with different groups off and taking industrial action at times. So I'm really hoping that we can move beyond a period of industrial strife in the service, because that will help a lot.
I can't see any other questions. Any other? Thank you very much for that, Andrew, because it's good to get an update each time we meet, and thank you for that. Okay, now we've got the ICB annual report. I think that's you, Matthew.
Thank you. And I appreciate this is something that needs to be received by the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm not too probably relieved going to try and summarise our annual report, but perhaps just pick out a few key items and then perhaps just give a slightly more up-to-date perspective on issues from the ICB perspective. So, but looking back, I think it's important to recognise the progress we made in terms of the second full year of the ICB. So we obviously worked to develop the ICB strategy across the system, and we published our joint forward plan as ICB along NHS partners in response to that, focused on developing our primary care strategy. So established some key strategic foundations for moving forward. It was a difficult year in terms of performance, and as Andy referred to, sort of industrial action impacted on some of our key performance metrics. Although we did start to reduce, we were successful in reducing some of our long waits, not quite across Bob at the pace that we would have liked to, but as Andy pointed out, in terms of a local level, RBFT had by a considerable margin the best performance in terms of those elective waits in our system. Our urgent care system remained challenged in terms of performance across the system, but I think we did a lot of good work actually in terms of some of that out of hospital model development, whether that be through urgent care response teams or virtual ward developments. A lot of good stuff in terms of that out of hospital model, which is obviously really strategically important to us. And I think in terms of that broader, wider primary care piece, also I think some good progress in terms of community pharmacies and their consultation and getting them more involved in some of the pathways, and some of our response on sort of flexible dentistry commissioning as well. So that broader pharmacy, optometry, dental area, which was newly delegated to the Integrated Care Board as well. And at a local level, I mean, you'll be aware of, I am sat here today covering for Sarah, but I'm sure you're aware of some of the work that Sarah's worked in partnership across the system, and focusing on working around health inequalities, partnership working around SEND, and other key areas. So we did have a difficult year financially, and ended the year with a deficit position, and you know, I think that's disappointing. We balanced the previous year, and obviously that does have ongoing consequences in terms of where we are this year. So in terms of this year, very briefly, just in terms of update before I open up for more general questions on the annual report. We are making good progress as a system in terms of elective weights. We probably will not hit 0 at the end of September, which is the national ambition, but we certainly will in this patch. So, and that goes to Andy's piece around the RBFT performance, and we're working closely with the trust in terms of preparing for winter, and some new initiatives around urgent care support, particularly on the RBFT side, working with the GP community and BHFT to maximise capacity. And we continue to work in terms of some of the SEND improvement work at a local level. But I don't know what level of detail Sarah may have gone into or you've done previously for this agenda item. So I'm happy just to stop there, Chair, and take observations, questions around the detail of the report.
No, Prue's got some questions.
Okay. Not so much questions, more, well, there are some questions, there's some observations, and it is quite long, so I'm sort of apologise for that in advance, but I'd rather get it out in one go because it's all connected.
Okay.
And it's not entirely positive, which you probably think, but I don't want you to think that I'm attacking you or any individuals, or Sarah particularly, who I think has tried her best to help us in Wokingham, and I don't have any criticism of her at all. And the points I want to make, they're about the presentation of the report, they're about how we see Wokingham in the report. There's a bit I want to go into more detail about children and young people who are on the waiting list for autism and ADHD. And something about the money and something about the workforce.
Okay.
So quite a comprehensive thing. So I'm starting from the position that I assume that the structure of the report is laid down for you by the NHS. I don't imagine you have much choice as to when to do it, how to do it, and what has to be included. But it's a very hard read. There's a lot of detail in there. There's no highlight report. That will be really handy for next year, that it will be easier to engage with as a starting point, because, I mean, we've just seen our health and wellbeing report, which is a set of pages, which is very clearly laid out for each strand, which helps you to understand what's going on, and also says what the gaps are and where we're going to go for the following year. And I can't find any of that in your report. I can find a lot of data. I can't find any information. That sounds a bit rude, but it is a bit like that. I realise it may be asking the impossible for you to do it, because the amount of work that you have to put in to do the things that the NHS requires you to do in your report take quite a lot of time and thought. But there's also an awful lot of NHS buzzwords in there, and a glossary would be very handy. I think that's a fairly simple thing that might be able to do. When I said it was a hard read, I I almost wanted to say impenetrable. It's really hard to engage with it or to pick out what's important in it. And I think this is a symptom of a wider problem, because a lot of effort's gone into a lot of things, but it's all in a very internally focused way. And the report shows there's a lot of activity in the ICB, but it doesn't really say anything about the impact of that activity on the outside world. And it doesn't really engage beyond your own boundaries. And honestly, that's how I feel generally about the ICB. There's a lot of people trying to do a lot of things in a very constrained and difficult set of circumstances, which is hard to operate in, but it feels like the outside world's an afterthought. I'll give you one example. I mean, you've been going through this enormous reorganisation, restructuring, because some of the difficulties you're having, but we're a Health and Wellbeing Board. We're engaged with at the end of the process, and only by insisting on it, as far as I can tell. No, it's like you're so in such a difficult situation that you've lost the ability to think outside your own boundaries and think how other people might be able to help you, or what we might need to know, or the impact of it on us. And it feels very difficult from my point of view. And on the performance part, my frustration is not only just trying to dig into the report to find out what's important in it, but also the fact that it covers the whole of the Bob area, which obviously I can understand you have to cover the whole area. A few things are disaggregated down to the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West level, but we can't tell anything from this about Wokingham itself. Nothing at all. So the bigger footprint of the ICB is taking away from our ability to focus on our own locality. And I know that you need to see the overall picture, and some of the things comparing Berkshire West and Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire are useful, but we struggle, and we struggle in every aspect of dealing with the ICB to get anything about Wokingham. And having to look at it on that higher level masks issues. And I'm sure you must understand that. It makes it difficult to work out what the data is actually telling us. And then it makes it difficult for us to work out, for example, whether you're adapting your service delivery appropriately to the needs of the local area, or whether it's just a blanket thing. I'm sure you don't deliver the same service in the same way to everybody, because you do try and target where you need to target, but you don't get a sense from this report about how you assess how you're performing in each place. And I picked out one example of this because I think it's quite important to everybody, which is on page 22, which is the hospital at home. So from the report, we can see you provide this service across Bob. We know from what's in the report you didn't reach the target bed capacity, and we know that across Bob the occupancy was 85%. But what we can't tell is whether one area is doing better than any other at providing the service. And obviously that is a crucial service because it keeps people out of hospital and thus frees up the hospital beds. And it's something that we want Wokingham to be good at, because it's important for our Better Care Fund that we are good at it. I'm sure you can understand, but we can't tell how we're doing at it. Obviously we have other means which we can eventually dig some of that out of, but it's what we need is something that breaks it down more, and allows us to compare between the areas so we can see whether we are doing well or not. And then I want to go on from that onto a particular issue, because I'm the lead member for Children's Services. I have a particular interest in the waiting lists for children and young people for autism and ADHD assessments. So you've got some figures on page 35 for the waiting lists in Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West. And those waiting lists are presented without really any comment. But doing some basic calculations based on the population in the 2021 census, which I had to dig out for myself, it reveals that per head of the population, the number of children waiting for assessment in Berkshire West is double that of Buckinghamshire and more than double that of Oxfordshire. And yet, despite having twice as many in the queue, the waiting time in Berkshire West is roughly half that of Oxfordshire or Buckinghamshire. And I want to know why. I want to know, is that because a shorter queuing time means more people stay in the queue? Does it mean we have actually got more people with autism and ADHD in Berkshire West? Or is it that they're not being picked up in Oxfordshire or Buckinghamshire? Or is it actually, when they actually are assessed, those children didn't actually have autism or ADHD, and so it's something to do with the parents asking rather than, or the schools are asking, and not the incidents. And the other thing, for the sake of completeness on that particular subject, is Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, ADHD and autism are lumped together as waiting lists, and in Berkshire West they're separate. And why is that? And so I've got a whole list of questions there. I'm not expecting you to answer them now. I thought about sending them in advance, but what I will do, they'll be picked up hopefully in the minutes. If they're not, I can give Madeline the list. We can get them answered maybe for the next meeting, because it's something that I think is quite important. And obviously this is a very difficult area with long waiting list times, and across the country that is. So I don't blame it, but I want to feel that you're being curious about it. And what I've got here is again a set of data. Moving on, so I'm nearly at the end here. Want to move on to the money, the turnaround programme. So I think I've got this right. Page 56 shows your revenue budget was overspent in year by 38 million, which I make is about 1%. Is that about right?
That's right.
Yep. Okay.
That's very good. Yep.
The notes under the table show that you're dragging behind you a net deficit of another 28 million because you inherited it from when the ICB was created from the CCGs. And you're going to have to start paying that off next year. And that's an additional pressure in the system. And that's led to the conclusion, I'm going to quote from page 57, that your system is not yet working in a way that is financially sustainable. That's quite a statement, but it's pretty well buried. I know it is referenced similarly in the overview from the Chief Executive on page 16. If I was you, I would be making sure everybody knew that this is the case. I know you may think it doesn't reflect well on you, but actually, how can you do your job if you haven't got enough money to do it? It's going to be really, really difficult for you to make those savings with all the challenges and demand. I mean, as a local authority, we're familiar with the circumstances which you have to operate, and we feel it the same. It's very, very hard on your staff, particularly with the programme of redundancies and things you're going to have to look at. And it's going to damage your ability to deliver the services, because you're pushed to the limits already on what you can do. But the implications of it are not articulated well in this report. And I mean, my own feeling is that you're only 2 years old. What this shows is you weren't properly funded in the first place when you were set up. One would hope that this is something that a new government might look at. I'm not hopeful, but they might. I mean, as I said, we are a local authority. We are equally cash strapped. But the only way to deal with this is for us to support each other in partnership so that our individual resources stretch further. Whereas the great temptation is to focus inwards and to make those cuts and do it in isolation. And I really think that I would, in fact, I implore you to try and do something about that culture in the ICB that is, I don't know, it's not really defensiveness, because I don't think the staff are defensive about things, you know, but they are, it's not a difficult mentality, it's just an inward looking culture that needs to change in order for us to be able to work together properly and really feel that we are helping each other, because we're going to sink. I was at a conference last year where the head of NHS England spoke, and in contrast to the year before, which was not a very good speech, last year she talked about the need for the public sector to cooperate and work together and work in partnership, because otherwise we will all sink. And I really think that's important. And you mentioned two things which I was going to pick up in that connection: your primary care strategy and your joint forward plan. Now, what I understand, the joint forward plan has nothing to do with anybody except in bits of the NHS jointly. It's not a joint forward plan that reaches out beyond the NHS. And both of those things, I would like to see engagement with us as a local authority, with us as a health and wellbeing board at an early stage in the production of any such strategies, because primary care strategy affects us. Absolutely. It's you know, it's our whole public health thing. And I know Ingrid has and Karen have contacts in the ICB and they work with individuals, but it's the culture that we need to alter so that we get cited on these things right at the first point and we can help you. I've talked about the revenue, but I think I'll reserve what I wanted to say about the capital until we come to the next item, which is the joint capital funding. In fact, that looks even worse if I'm the revenue. And then the final point I want to make is about the workforce. The workforce shortages are referred to on page 73 as part of the annual governance statement. And I can see that an advisory review was carried out by internal audit on the workforce planning. But there's no information at all about what they found because it was an advisory review. There's no audit comment, audit judgment or opinion. And I don't know what's been shared with us about that. I think it must be a very tough area, workforce planning, for you to deal with in isolation, because actually what you need is a national workforce plan for the NHS to tackle all the different kinds of shortages that you face. But we also face some of the same sorts of shortages in the same sorts of roles. And so, again, it's another area where we could collaborate together to try and sort things out. But I couldn't find anything that the detail just wasn't in there. There was basic information about staff turnover, staff sickness. There was nothing about your vacancy rates that I could find. So I'm going to sum all that up. I think what I want to say is a lot of very significant information in this report, but it isn't easy to find it. There's a lot of missing. I don't get a sense of your priorities from it. I do get a sense that money is really tight. And that you're struggling with poor quality buildings, staff shortages and increasing demand, and that it's not clear whether inconsistent quality of delivery is a problem or not, because it's just not available in the report. And I feel sad that here we are after 2 years and we still feel like we're on the outside of your organisation, and we really want to work with you. And I suppose all my frustration has come out in reading this report. As I say, it's not a reflection on any individuals, because I know that people are trying hard to deliver good quality services. So I don't want you to think that I'm not thinking that, but there's something about the culture. And it was a bit of a problem with the PCTs in the old days, that they didn't wish to communicate with the outside world. CCG was a bit better, but it's gone. The bigger footprint has gone against us in building those relationships and in building the partnership working that we really need to build. And so I've used that annual report as a hook to hang all that off. And I'm sorry to bombard you with it at a meeting when we haven't been to our health and wellbeing board for about 10 years, but that's how I feel, and I want it to be better. And I don't know what we can do to change that, because I know Susan and David has been trying to engage, and I don't know whether they want to say anything about their own sense, but it is very hard when we really feel we're all on the same side and we would like to work together.
Thank you very much, Prue. And yes, as a member of the ICP, I think we go to our meetings, we come away again, and nothing happens. And in some ways, that seems to be the problem, that the ICB is so big and looking after itself, and isn't reaching out to others and working with us. And I don't know if Susan's got anything.
I think probably I wanted to just add a couple of examples of where I'm hoping that we can be really engaged. So Prue mentioned about the financials, and I know, Matthew, you've already mentioned about the financial challenges, and you'll be putting in place action plans to address this is in the future now, the financial challenges that you have. And my worry is that there will be a knock-on effect of those financial savings in the different local authority areas. And we really need to understand as a system the proposals that are being put forward, what the impact will be, and how we can mitigate, because ultimately, as Prue said, it's about how we do this together. Of course, as a local authority, we have responsibilities as well, but it is absolutely how we do this stuff together. I think another sort of like challenges around SEND. I know you talked about SEND, and so we've got SEND, we've got the area inspections. It involves a whole range of partners, and the regulators will look at all partners involved. And I know there's a number of action groups that sit within Bob and working on this. And it's just the regulators, the inspectors will actually look at each area, each local authority area, what's happening in each local authority area. So while there's cross-cutting issues, of course, there will be cross-cutting issues. It's about how we ensure together that the Bob addresses the local challenges that they need to address. I think I'd probably say that. And then finally, the point about the changes that are being made structurally to Bob on a place basis. I know we have had an opportunity to put forward our views on that. My concern is about how those views will be taken on board. How much of those views will be taken on board, because we've had challenges for quite a few years in different areas, whether that's CHC being one of a particular challenge that we've had. I know there's some progress being made there now, but it's taken quite some time to actually get there. And so yeah, it's about how we can do this stuff together in a quicker way.
Yeah, well, thank you. A number of comments, I guess, and I think there'll be a combination of acceptance, a bit of challenge, and back as well, and a bit of a acknowledgement that we need to do more. So I think, so just picking up some of the points. So you're right, the annual report is prescribes. It's not really a good public-facing document. But I think we'd absolutely accept that, and I would accept that even if we improve the public-facing dynamics of it, it would always be a challenge for an annual ICB report to be the vehicle to address some of the challenges you've made about understanding the local dynamics and the local progress. So I don't think that is the document, and I think. So some of my challenge, I guess, is about the health and wellbeing. So it is standard custom and practice or statutory requirement to receive our annual report. That annual report is not the most effective way for us to report on progress in Wokingham. And I think that's perhaps the challenge for the board to think, well, actually, if the annual report is never going to do that, because I don't think it will anymore, it might have done it better when there was a more local geography of a CCG annual report, but I expect you made the same challenges to Berkshire West CCG, perhaps, that some of the formal annual report didn't address. But I don't know. But I think we probably have to accept that isn't going to be the vehicle to update on some of the local work. So we then, as a health and wellbeing board, have to think, well, what is the vehicle? What is the reporting that can do that? Because the annual report isn't going to do it. I think it would be my response on that. But we need to design something that will. We can do better, I think, with the annual report in terms of a publicly facing angle to it, but I think there has to be something else. And apologies for my ignorance, it may be that there is something else that does feed in. So apologies if I haven't got that right. I was going to respond to a number of points, but I'm happy to take a challenge on that
to
first.
respond to one of the questions that you've posed about what might be better. I think, Matthew, you'll know this one, as in when I say it, it's having area-based information for Wokingham, because I think the Bob sees Berkshire West as a place. Well, we see Wokingham as a place, and in this regard. So we need data that relates to the borough, because that really helps us. It's not just because we want it; it's because it really helps with our decision making and our working together. And informed decision making. So I think that for me is the more that information approved. You did allude to that. We did mention that when you talked. The more we can have information on that basis, I think the better.
Yes, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think probably the action to reflect, or for me to reflect on from this, and maybe work with Health and Wellbeing Board colleagues, is to say, well, actually, we do need to tailor specific reports to this Health and Wellbeing Board, where there is an absolute challenge of having local insights, and that might be. I'm going to keep getting comments. I'll let you come in, and then I'll move on.
It's not just sorry. Oh, you've turned off your right. So we can only have two microphones on at once. So this is the restriction. It's not just the data that comes to the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's actually everything that we need out of the ICB. So we have data on all sorts of things, which it is very difficult to get in a disaggregated form, and some of those are challenges on your side. We had a discussion yesterday at our SEND Partnership Board about DSR data and then a dashboard of relevant data that we were going to get. And you have difficulties because all the partners within the NHS, and there's a wide range of people that deal with that kind of data, have all got manual processes. And what was happening there is exactly the same as I was trying to describe with this report, in that you knew there was a problem, you knew that you needed to automate some of that, and that you need to consider what data we want, but they were going off and doing it and then telling us what they'd done, instead of saying to us, and I was trying to point out, I don't think the point got across at all, that if you're going to invest effort in creating a system to automate the data, so make life easier for yourselves as well as transmit data to us, you could perhaps ask us what data we would find useful or what we think should be on the dashboard, so that you don't have to go and retrofit it, or worse of all, not fit it at all at some future point. But there just seemed to be an incomprehension that should be the way around that you do it, that you actually ask us before you do all the work. And they were going to tell us at the end when they'd done it. And trying to get that message across that proper co-production, which we have done with our send and inclusion strategy at the insistence of the ICB, proper co-production with workshops with both sides, fundamental principles forwards and onwards, that you don't do it yourselves. So, sorry, that's a bit sweet. But it is that getting that disaggregated data is difficult at every level. But I think because you have your own internal challenges, and some of it certainly comes up, but some of it just comes in a different mindset somehow, and we have to get across to you. It's no use to us to have it at a Berkshire West level, or very much less use to us than anything else. But it's not just for the board; it's everywhere in all our interactions.
And there will be data challenges.
Yes,
I accepted that, and you may be glad to know, or not glad to know, that the discussion yesterday around that SEND piece was escalated to me this morning, and I'll be picking it up. There are two sides to every story, but I'll be picking up with my director tomorrow in terms of the difficulty of that conversation that was had yesterday. So hopefully that demonstrates there is an escalation route when partnership discussions require escalation and correction. So I'm hoping that seems a positive rather than anything else.
I don't want you to think that I think they're doing it deliberately. No. I don't think they are. I
think on children's services, I think absolutely it's a really challenged area. That there is just a data capture reason, to be honest, to answer your specific questions around why it's split in Berkshire West and not in the other two areas. That's how the trust count and record. So it is different, and that will take time to correct. But in terms, again, of that priority, I suppose the challenge is lifting that away from what might be the annual report to saying, well, actually, through our partnership structures, whatever they may be, the health and wellbeing boards, scrutiny's role, or indeed our joint working across the trusts and the ICB through the partnership arrangements that Sarah's involved in, that we get the right systematic reporting in place. The money point, yes, I think, is in the chief exec's. I'm not trying to defend it. It's in the chief exec's summary. It's a really important issue. The system is not sustainable. That's demonstrated by the deficit of the ICB and the deficit of some of our partner organisations, and that position is more obvious today than it perhaps even was over last year. So as Andy identified, we've got some real challenges across the system. And to Susan's point, then yes, absolutely, we are working through the recovery of that, and a lot of it is around internal control and understanding our priorities. But I think we absolutely have to engage in any service discussions or service impacts as a result of that across all our partnerships. And I suppose the other point, points I would make, and I'm happy to be challenged. Okay.
Can I? And in terms of when there's real financial challenge,
yes.
If I can, speak generally about it. One of the real risks is that it becomes very internal focused, which again played through his saying, very internal focused and very regimented and rules based. Yeah. And actually innovation is lost and the opportunity for transformation is lost. So I think my plea is that as you said, the report today again is going to mean more sort of like pressure. My plea is to not go to a silo, rules-based, must not spend this, to really, that is important for internal controls, of course, that's good governance, but it is about actually having the space for transformation, because going back to the point about mental health and there are areas that need to be invested in, really invested in, and despite the fact that savings need to be made. So how do you square that circle? Yeah, those big financial challenges.
I think that's a really fair point, Susan. I was going to come to that. I would agree. It's really important that we hold our nerve in terms of the partnership space, the innovation, and the left shift. But I'm not going to pretend that that's easy. As you've outlined, a natural response to financial control is centralisation and rules, and we have to work through that, because to the times it feels that's the place we're in right now, and I think we have to come out of that and look up, because actually that might help the short-term situation in terms of control, but actually it's not going to be the solution to sustainability. So I think that's absolutely right, and we have to hold our nerve on that. And we also, I think, to your point, have to hold our nerve on the importance of partnership working within that, and the importance of our place-based partnerships and our collaboratives, which operate at, the acute provider collaborative and the mental health provider collaborative. We have to hold our nerve that it's that partnership model that will get us through to sustainability. So I agree with that. That's the board are absolutely committed to that within the ICB, but there is a natural tension, which is when you're in financial control regimes, that's you have to work hard to hold that position, and we are committed to working hard to hold that position.
Yeah, if I can just ask, because I think you need the investment, and I've said this to the chief executive before, about actually having funding in money for investment in innovation, so it's or in change. So I think that is important, and I think that going back to your point about the importance of place, what I would say is the proposals that have been put forward around the change to the place structure makes a moderate saving, but could have a really big impact on, actually negative impact on how we work together in partnership. And I know we've had the opportunity to feedback, so I'm hoping that those points will be taken on board when the final structure is published.
And on that particular point, the time isn't quite right for us to be able to formalise how we've responded to partner feedback. We have a board meeting at the end of September where we will look at the structure, the feedback, and outline any changes. But we have really listened. There will be some changes in response to the feedback. Absolutely, I'm not able to confirm what they are. And I think regardless of what the ICB model is, I think we have to find a way to support and work with our place-based partnerships to become stronger, more important, and allow them and enable them to develop. There are multiple ways of doing that, but it has to be a central plank, I think, of the system strategy moving forward. I'm just going to say there are a couple of any other points I wanted to pick up, because I suppose that there would be, and I'm happy to say that it didn't work that well, but obviously the ICP, the Joint Forward Plan, is a response to the ICP strategy, which is not an ICB document. It's a strategic document across all partners, and the point of the JFP was to respond to that from an NHS perspective, just as the local work that you're doing around your own organisational plans will take into account the ICP strategy, and the Health and Wellbeing Board Plan more broadly will also respond to that. So, and I think we did engage on that Joint Forward Plan. I think we had a couple of quite big events that were well attended by all partners, and I would also say that we did engage on the primary care strategy, but we may not have got it quite right, and I'm happy to take feedback that we didn't get that quite localised enough. But there was a huge effort around engagement to make sure we did get the feed in. But happy to take corrections and add to that.
I think, again, thinking forward, I think that the ICP, I think I'm a bit concerned about the ICP and its role and in engagement with the ICP, because I think, again, going back to the place-based structure proposal, there wasn't necessarily an engagement with the ICP. And I think more generally it's about how, because that is the partnership vehicle, and so where arguably real opportunity lies. So it's about how we'll ensure that the ICP can be as effective as it can be.
I think we've got work to do. I absolutely agree. I think we've got work to do across all partners to make the ICB as effective as it could be. On the structural question, it'll be my last comment on that. I think I think we accept some criticism around that being exercised and implemented as an internal issue, where it clearly has a lot of partner concerns, and I think we accept there's learning to do around how we engaged on that structural change. I think which we've been quite open about, and we'll learn that in terms of future. Well, hopefully there won't be too many future reorganisations, but my career history in the NHS tells me there may well be a few.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you for taking these things. And as Bruce says, we want to work with you and not just put you down, but say, come on, let's work together better, because that's what I really believe, and I know that's what Susan and Drew believe as well. Andrew, you've got something.
Yeah, David, I was just reflecting on that and then thinking, what as a board, what action are we trying to take forward to move us into a better place? And this may not be quite right, but I thought of three things that might be helpful. I think the first one would be for us to think about how we can schedule some time to hear from and engage together on where have we got to with the Joint Forward Plan, particularly with the Wokingham flavour. And that could be a really good session for us here at the board about where have we got to and what's next, and thinking in from a Wokingham flavour. I think there's definitely something about how can we identify for Matthew and the team a small number of key indicators for this board that we would like to see on a Wokingham basis, be that related to acute services or to mental health services or wider care perspectives. And then I wonder if there's also something that we could engage with the ICB's turnaround plan about where are the what does Matthew and the team perceive to be the potential risks with the schemes that they're taking, and actually more importantly the potential opportunities for partners to work together on that transformation agenda. So I don't know if those are helpful, but I was just thinking about how do we actually move forward and actually create things that help to solve the problem.
I think in terms of, if I take your final point, I think it would be really positive if we absolutely can understand more of the detail around the turnaround plan, and absolutely, and I think it's just ensuring that we can, that our voice is at the right time as well, so that we can have an impact on that. And I think it does require, I mean, going back to your point there about time, does require sort of time as well on all sides in terms of to really to discuss and understand. In the same way as a council, I'm thinking about the fact that we're spending a lot of time on our budget proposals for savings and throughout this sort of autumn in terms of scrutiny. So it is about having the right sort of time for that. And for sure, in terms of KPIs for Wokingham, that would be good. So really thinking about which KPIs they might be, as you're saying.
I mean, yeah, I think thank you, Andrew, because you've given us some things which I think would be very useful. Certainly, as Susan said, certainly the KPIs would be useful, but also we need to spend time with you, Matthew, and Andrew and people to really know what's happening, so that we can work with you better, because that's our intention, and that's I think important for both sides.
No, I think they're helpful suggestions. I suppose what was going through my mind is the link between some of that joint forward plan response and the metrics to the first agenda item in terms of that work, and it might be just useful to understand the overlap between those, if there are any, and where those overlaps are best targeted. But I think we'd need to work through that, but there might be a way to overlap, because in reality, our joint forward plan should be supporting the ICP strategy. The ICP strategy built heavily on health and wellbeing board strategy, so there should be a synergy in that piece. I think most of the service-based sustainability debates will have to be slightly longer term. So I think that challenge is really about how do we get into the 25-26 planning cycle together, align what local authorities are having to do to balance the books alongside the NHS as well. Our immediate focus is quite short term grip and control environment, and we can do updates on that. But at the moment, there aren't any identified clear service reductions that we need to talk about. There are some areas where we've effectively slowed the pace of improvement, probably for want of a better word to use. But I suppose that what I need to take away is, I guess, what are the forums for engaging? So we can't all be held in the space of this board. There is, well-developed partnership work in Berkshire West that obviously I'm leaning into a little bit with Sarah's absence. We just need to think what elements of that we can use effectively as well. And obviously there are formal roles around scrutiny as well that we need to fill. So it feels to me there is a bit of a structural piece to do around what how do we have the conversations, at what form we have the type of conversations that Susan's challenged us on. But those 3 areas I think that Andy's challenged us on, I think are really helpful flags to move the debate forward.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for allowing us to have our position and the fact that we want to work with you, but sometimes we find it very hard. And you know, and thank you for acknowledging that sometimes it is, and we need to work better together, because you know that's important too. So thank you very much for this. And I think you've now got the Joint Capital Resource Plan, and that's you as well, I'm afraid.
I think I'll probably just jump straight to questions on that. I mean, the Capital Resource Plan, just for context, is that's primarily organisational focus. So whilst there is an overarching plan that you've got, I think it is built on primarily organisational allocations. And just for context, I think the plan refers to primary care as well, that most of our primary care developments are not technically capital spend, and capital covers both the sort of maintenance, development, and a lot of the IT elements of spend. And I think I can't quite remember who made the point about capital challenges compared to revenue capital challenges. I would say strategically our capital challenges in the NHS are bigger than our revenue challenges. I would agree with that statement in terms of some of the strategic challenges we've got, and our capital plan does the very best it can on the funding that's allocated to us as a system. But I wouldn't want to underestimate the risk we have around capital availability and the impact that has on services across Bob. And I know that Andy could give you multiple examples of some of that risk from an RBFT perspective. But I'm happy just to jump straight to questions if that's easier.
And Prue has questions.
Yes, it's not really a question, it's more sympathy. Nothing else. This reminds me of the days when all schools used to be maintained schools, and we had school condition surveys, and things are ranked from 1 to 4 in terms of importance. And you get these vast documents, and you were lucky if you had enough money to do all the priority 1 things, which would have shut the school if they weren't actually done. And you're in somewhat the same position. I think 92 million or something is your capital programme, and yet you've got 204.5 million backlog maintenance, never mind, of which quite a lot is high risk. I think the paragraph on page 147 sort of says it all, that as a result of historic funding challenges and siloed ways of working, the majority of estate in Bob is unfit for purpose and unable to accommodate population growth and new ways of working, including integrated neighbourhood teams as described in the Integrated Care Partnership Strategy. There is a risk of Bob ICB being unable to transform primary and community care and meet its access objectives as per the operational and joint forward plans, resulting in inadequate primary and community access to essential services and an increase in inappropriate A&E attendance. And that really says to me, we have to back you in whatever way we can to get you some more capital by appealing to government with you, or to, whatever it is we need to do. We need separately to this, the hospital building programme is also a bit flaky, but you can't be expected to deliver services with an inadequate estate. And I don't know what we can do to help you, because the position you're in is just impossible.
And I think probably primary care is a real challenge, but actually, as I tried to mention, it's the one area where there probably is more space for innovative solutions, because we don't really rely on capital funding for primary care redevelopments. Most of the primary care redevelopments that I've overseen over the years have been third-party redevelopments, and actually the cost of the ICB is a revenue cost through a lease mechanism. And I think there is more space for sort of one public estate approaches for primary care and integrated neighbourhood teams. So if I think we can get that engagement piece right on some of the primary care strategy, I think there is more options for actually local authorities to work with the NHS around addressing some of those primary care solutions, especially if you think of that strategically around where you want to place some of the primary care access and integrated with some of the broader primary care pharmacy offerings. It's a bit more, I think, of a innovative space. I mean, Andy needs capital for a new hospital. That is that's clear. Primary care, I think there are more options. So whilst I'm not going to gloss over the challenges that this plan clearly outlines, I think I have a little bit more optimism that primary care is not completely reliant on a national position on capital funding. But it does require revenue, which obviously is also a problem.
And one of the, from a local authority perspective, one of the most frustrating things for us is that we put in new development and find it extremely difficult to lever in any primary care services into that large scale new development. We've had one issue, it's historic, so it's, it may not happen again, but where we built a strategic development location, we wanted to put some healthcare facilities in and we couldn't find a single GP who was prepared to take it on, and no backing from the NHS to try and help us to find that. I think we can't go on like that, because actually we need more housing as a country, and the resistance to housing often comes from people who are concerned that the infrastructure won't be delivered with it. And one of those things that they really care about is the health infrastructure that goes with it, not just GPs, but pharmacies, dentists, and the other things that you mentioned earlier. So if there's some way we can work together to try and produce some of that in our forward planning, and we're taking our local plan for agreement next Thursday. Right. And it has, if it's approved, it will have some similar sort of size strategic development locations in it. That may help you, it may help us, and it may help our residents. And I think that is the kind of thing where we can work together. And so we want to work with you on that, and if we can help, I'm sure we will.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think we do have to look at creative solutions. Though I've been around too long, and I know that it's the challenge is that we struggle to get the right response for various housing developments. We probably don't sit up and look more strategically at what the solution for primary care services and how we support that, because we know that putting one small practice to respond to a development is never going to be the strategic solution. So, but absolutely accept we need to engage in those debates, and it's part of it has to be part of our primary care strategy as we move to implementation. And it goes back to the point we talked about place-based support. We do have. I think primary care we do have a one team, but that one team does have place-focused resource, and I'm sure it's Sanjay for this system in terms of working through some of those debates.
Thank you, Matthew. And has anyone else got any other comments? Well, thank you very much, and I hope we didn't put you too much on the rack with this too. But it's because we want to help, and I think you realise that. Okay. We've got the forward programme in November. We've got update on SEND, all age autism strategy, which will be, I think, quite a big thing. With Foundation Trust, and then the feedback. I feel with the all age autism strategy, we don't want too much more unless we have necessity of it. Does anyone know anything else that needs to go in that? Do we? Sorry.
Practical no, because I don't quite know how I haven't done enough research on this health and wellbeing board in terms of do we bring standard ICB updates? I know that for some of our health and wellbeing board there is a bit more of a corporate update that we do, and then we update on local areas. I'm just thinking to Andy's point about that we might want to do even if it is a brief update on some of the challenges and how we're progressing on some of the free hooks that Andy challenged us on. I'm really encouraged that actually we do have the sort of deep dive on SEND and all age autism, which picked up at least one of your points that we can then hopefully get into some of those issues. But I suppose it might be helpful just to have an ICB update that we link directly to some of the challenges you put to me today.
Yeah, that's.
I was thinking of that and thinking it would be good to have an ICB update every 2 months. Even if you say, well, there isn't much change, at least we know that there isn't much change. But I'm sure, every 2 months just to hear what's happening is going to be quite positive. And yes, it's the broader ICB, but it's also how the ICB works down in Wokingham that we're interested in too. And so if we could have that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I was thinking about the points that Prue raised. It would be good if we could get a response. Sort of, I know you'll probably respond before then, but if we can sort of get something at the next meeting as part of the ICB response. Happy
to do that. And I'm sure they will be well captured in the minutes in terms of the specifics. If we can just pull out the specific, that will help me ensure that we respond specifically. Yeah, we can follow up with the point. We can send you something. Thank you.
Emma, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Is your point covered?
It was just to clarify in terms of the autism strategy will be coming back post consultation, just in terms of update in respect of the changes. I think you made the comment, David, about not wanting to spend lots of time in the November, but maybe I misunderstood.
Oh, I thought we might spend some time on it in November, so
yeah,
that's okay. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
In January, we haven't really got anything other than the 2 updates. Now the ICB update and the RBH update. Is there anything else that we need to put in then? You've got time to think about that.
Can I just check in terms of the first agenda item and the development of those metrics? How's that factored into the forward plan? Sorry, again, not being familiar with the operating model.
I think we have a more informal meeting, get together before that public meeting, and we can discuss how we want to carry it forward, I think, then in some more detail. Yeah.
Emma, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, just a suggestion for the forward plan to have the annual safeguarding partnership report to come and report into this meeting, and that should be ready to review by January. So that might be a good opportunity to put that in the agenda.
Thank you, Emma. I think that's very important that we look at that. So that's good. And Ingrid, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say that we've got our October steering group meeting, which Matthew will be invited to too, but that's not a public board meeting, so that might be a good opportunity to have a broader discussion.
Yes, thank you. Okay, well, I think that's everything, and thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions and so on. And we have an informal meeting next, and then we meet again like this in November. So thank you very much.